One night, a village went to sleep. And by morning, every single person was dead. No screaming, no running, no warning. Just silence. And a lake that looked exactly like this.
On the night of August 21st, 1986, a lake in Cameroon did something nature shouldn't be able to do. It exploded in total silence, releasing an invisible cloud that claimed 1,800 lives before they could even wake up. No one ever saw it coming, and the science behind what happened is so extraordinary. It sounds impossible. This is not a horror movie. This actually happened. This is the story of Lake Nyos and the most unique natural disaster ever recorded. 1986, northwestern Cameroon looked like a paradise. It was a land of green mountains, quiet farms, and small, peaceful villages. At the top of a sleeping volcano sat Lake Nyos. To the people living there, it was just a beautiful, blue lake. It was perfectly still. They had no idea they were living next to a ticking time bomb. But deep under that blue water, a deadly secret was building up. 50 miles below the lake, hot volcanic rock was leaking gas, pure carbon dioxide, into the bottom of the water. For hundreds of years, this gas stayed trapped at the bottom because the water above it was so heavy. Think of it like a giant bottle of Coke. As long as the cap is on tight, the bubbles stay invisible. The weight of the lake was the cap holding back a massive explosion of gas that was just waiting for a reason to escape. It was a Thursday evening. Families had eaten dinner. Children were asleep. Farmers were resting after a long day. Then, around 9 p.m., something disturbed the deep water of Lake Nyos. Nobody knows exactly what triggered it. Scientists believe it may have been a small landslide into the lake, or perhaps a micro-tremor beneath the surface. Whatever it was enough. The cold, gas-filled water from the bottom started rushing to the surface. As it rose, the cap came off, and the gas exploded out. In seconds, the lake shot a massive tower of water and gas 300 feet into the air. A giant wave, 5 stories high, slammed into the shore, snapping trees like they were toothpicks. But the wave wasn't the biggest problem. Behind it came the real killer. About 100,000 tons of pure carbon dioxide, heavier than air, poured out of the lake and began rolling downhill, moving at nearly 45 miles per hour. Silent, invisible, deadly. Carbon dioxide doesn't burn. It doesn't glow. It has no color. In the darkness of the night, it was absolutely impossible to see. And it swept through 4 villages: Nyos, Kam, Cha, and Subum like a ghost. People didn't scream. They didn't run. They didn't even wake up. The CO2 displaced all the oxygen in the air around them. Within seconds, anyone caught in the cloud simply lost consciousness and never woke up. One survivor, a man named Joseph, described waking up the next morning confused, with strange wounds on his body, his clothes stained. He opened his door and called out to his neighbors. No one answered. He walked through the village. Every door, every home. Everyone was dead.
By morning, 1,746 people were dead. 3,500 cattle, countless birds, insects, every living thing within 15 miles of the lake's path. And here's the most chilling detail of all. The bodies showed no signs of trauma, no injuries, no struggle. They had simply died exactly where they were standing.
When the outside world found out what happened, nobody could explain it. A French and American research team rushed to the scene. There had been no earthquake, no volcanic eruption, no storm. The lake had turned a dark, rust-brown color. The surrounding forest had been flattened, and the water level had actually dropped, suggesting something massive had burst out from beneath the surface. One scientist, a volcanologist named Haraldur Sigurdsson, proposed something that had never been documented before in recorded history. He called it a limnic eruption, a lake overturn. The idea was this: when deep CO2, saturated water, is suddenly disturbed and rises, the drop in pressure causes the dissolved gas to explosively come out of solution, the same way a shaken soda bottle erupts when opened. But this wasn't a soda bottle. This was a lake holding the equivalent of 300 million cans of carbonated water. To put this in perspective, the air we breathe contains less than 0.04% carbon dioxide. At 5%, a human being becomes disoriented and loses consciousness. At 10%, it's fatal within minutes. Near Lake Nyos that night, scientists estimated CO2 levels may have reached 10 to 20%. There was simply no surviving it.
What made this even more terrifying was the realization that this had already happened once before, just 2 years earlier in 1984 at Lake Nyos, just 60 miles away. 37 people died, but because it was remote Africa, the world barely noticed. Now, after Lake Nyos, the scientific community finally had a name for this phenomenon, and a horrifying question: where else in the world could this happen? The aftermath was devastating. Entire families wiped out in minutes. Survivors who escaped because they lived on higher ground woke up to find everyone they knew was gone. Many suffered respiratory problems, burns on their skin from the CO2 exposure, and psychological trauma that lasted years. Some survivors never returned to their villages. The government of Cameroon, with very limited resources, struggled to manage the scale of the tragedy. International aid trickled in slowly. But the scientific community mobilized. If Lake Nyos could explode once, it could explode again. The magma below was still leaking CO2 into the water every single day. The solution they came up with was ingenious. A team installed a long pipe, 203 meters deep, anchored to a floating raft in the middle of the lake. The pipe draws up the CO2-saturated deep water and releases it slowly at the surface, creating a permanent, self-sustaining fountain. A controlled, gentle release of the gas that could have caused the next catastrophe. Today, that fountain still runs, a silent guardian, slowly venting the danger that builds beneath the surface. The lake has been safe since the degassing began. Fish were reintroduced in 1996. Some villagers have slowly returned. But scientists are watching closely, because the system depends on equipment that must be maintained, and funding is never guaranteed. And here is where the story gets genuinely terrifying for the modern world. Lake Nyos holds roughly 300 million cubic meters of CO2. It killed 1,746 people. Across Africa, on the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, sits Lake Kivu. Lake Kivu is over 2,000 times larger than Lake Nyos, and it is saturated with both CO2 and methane. 2 million people live on its shores. Scientists have found geological evidence suggesting Lake Kivu has had large eruption events roughly every 1,000 years. The last one would have been approximately 1,000 years ago. Nobody knows when the next one is. There is no reliable early warning system, and the lake continues to fill with gas every day. The Lake Nyos disaster changed how geologists understand lakes. It created an entirely new category of natural disaster. It proved that the most dangerous killer on Earth doesn't have to be loud or visible or dramatic. Sometimes it just rises quietly in the dark. The people who died at Lake Nyos on August 21st, 1986, most of them never even woke up. They had no warning, no chance to run. They were farmers, parents, children, elders, living their lives in one of the most beautiful landscapes on the planet. And they were killed by something no human being had ever seen before. The killer lake still sits in its crater today, quieter now, watched, managed. But the earth beneath it hasn't stopped breathing. It never does.